Welcome back to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence. One of the most valuable things a marketing leader can do is create alignment across an organization. Because even the best strategy will struggle if people don't understand it, support it, or see where they fit. Marketing has a unique opportunity to build trust, create shared understanding, and help organizations move in the same direction. Today, we're talking about why alignment is such a critical leadership skill and how marketing can become a catalyst for it. Joining me is Gwen Cantarera, Senior Director of Global Marketing at Nordic, where she leads global go-to-market strategy, partner marketing, communications, and positioning for a complex consulting portfolio serving healthcare organizations across the US, Canada, and Europe. Gwen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is I think, an important topic for our audience to dig into. And I really wanted to start with something you said in our prep conversation that really stuck with me. You described marketing as potentially being the heart of an organization. Let's talk about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I really believe, and I think it comes from my background in startups and very entrepreneurial teams where the disparate groups were very close, but marketing tends to get the best from people, right? People tend to need things from marketing. And so we're so exposed to what the delivery team strategy is. In our instance, internal counsel with us. So what are those back office folks? What do they need from us? Where might there be dissenting opinions among people? We tend to get all of that information and then are able to make connections across groups, in my opinion, that really help at times, if done well, and if the trust is there, kind of distill down, oh, this group thinks this thing because they're in delivery and representing a client, right? This group thinks that thing because they're in sales and they're representing a different lens. And so in my opinion, if we're doing it right and we're approaching um, what we offer with curiosity, then that exposure comes. And so then we really have this unique view of the organization and the varying parts and pieces and opinions and influences that everyone is driven by.
Yeah, I love the way you framed that, really sitting in having a unique position, that unique view to make those connections. And I love the word that you use of curiosity. I think that's an important attribute that marketing leaders need to have, to your point, to be able to ask questions, to listen, to pay attention, to understand, and to help be able to make those connections and create that alignment across an organization. Why do you think many organizations maybe don't fully see that role, that leadership role that marketing needs to play inside of an organization from that overall alignment perspective?
It's an interesting question, and I think one that we all grapple with, right? All marketers grapple with, and I think it's multifaceted. And I think that there can be, again, a misalignment of what is the goal of marketing? What are we here to do? How do we do that? And then, and there can be a myopic view of that, right? It's very single threaded. And then you layer on the fact that it can be difficult to thread that needle from impact or from activity to impact for marketing, right? There are any more of metrics and data and KPIs that I can report against. I just had an instance recently where we're talking with the team and we were sharing some KPIs and we shared a stat. And I literally said, but the next question you should be asking me is this, right? Because that's what puts that metric into the proper context to really evaluate it. And so I think that we're in it day to day, right? We know the impact, we know the difference between a nascent brand and an established brand, and the levers that we need to pull to drive the trajectory of something like that. But like any specialty, it can be undervalued and underappreciated when you're not in it day to day and when you haven't had the benefit of the storytelling, and you're so busy, right? How many of
Yeah.
these other leaders and these other executives are so busy and they have so much on their plate that asking them to sit down and really tune in to what marketing is doing, uh, especially with the stereotypes around marketing, it's difficult, right?
Yeah, and really the responsibility is ours to really pull people out of that myopic view and lens, if that's perhaps what their legacy perspective of marketing is, and to lead by example and demonstrate, as you gave those great examples of, these are the other questions that you should be asking, right?
Mhm.
As I'm presenting this information, using those, KPI reporting meetings and other meetings as opportunities to demonstrate how to evolve the way that the organization is really looking at and
Exactly.
viewing the role of marketing.
And I really think, right, so often, marketing gets conflated with other departments, especially sales, right? And
Hmm.
that role of how is marketing driving the pipeline into sales, and then right, that those parts and pieces and those tactics can be so fluid, which is amazing, and they should be, right? Marketing, my opinion is marketing and sales should be so interconnected and working in lockstep, but there are very defined goals. And we are aiming for different things because we're trying to achieve different ends of the same buyer journey, right? And so where we come into play is different from when sales comes into play, but especially now, right? Like, especially now with what the AI is doing to the buyer journey, really getting integrated with those teams. It's immensely important and impactful, but it can also really conflate what is marketing supposed to do versus what is a sales enablement role versus. So anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we'll probably come back to some of those threads throughout the conversation here. I opened the episode with the word alignment, and I
Mhm.
really want to dig in around that. I think many organizations, we talked about this, believe alignment comes from process, more
Mm,
meetings, more approvals, more documentation. But that's not how you described it when we first talked. So let's talk more about how you believe that alignment actually happens inside of an organization.
yeah, I probably drive some people crazy. We just were addressing this as a team, right? And for the record, I believe in process. I also believe in breaking process. So I am one, I really believe that alignment comes in, it's the same way the sales come in our industry, right? It's relationships. It's relationships,
Yeah.
it's building trust. It's bringing you into more of the sausage making, if you will, than maybe other people are comfortable with. It's having check-ins and not overly engineered check-ins. A
Mm,
15-minute ping to say, I've got some language questions here. I want to say this, but I'm worried that it means that, right? And I might say that to a delivery leader. And so alignment to me is really built on a foundation of transparency, of communication, of trust, which is built in these unofficial, casual moments where we as marketers are not afraid to be vulnerable and say, I actually don't know what you mean when you say we impact X,
yeah.
Y, right? And also, and I have really greatly benefited from this culture throughout my career, but absolutely at Nordic, where then my stakeholders are incredibly generous with their knowledge as well, right? And so there's two pieces to this, but quite frankly, anytime I can take advantage of a casual moment where I am not afraid to ask a question, any question at all, and get further explanation. And then I'm not afraid to say, here's here's a here's a messy whiteboard that I'm thinking about. Can you look at this with me? and tell me what you think, right? And it's not a fully baked presentation. It's not something that's gone through 5 rounds of creative and 2 dry runs. It's I'm literally playing around with Post-its on Microsoft Whiteboard. Will you sit with me for 15 minutes?
I love that. I think that's a great example, and I love the frame of thinking of this as like very real time, tiny
Mhm,
moments, right? Many of them are spontaneous in nature, as you described it. It's like bringing them into the sausage making. As because as I look back at, across my career and some of the very best leaders and most successful marketing leaders that I've benefited from working with do exactly that,
mhm,
right? They will go, we need a gut check on this, right? Before we go too far down this pathway, I need a gut check and I need to know that the organization is bought into this,
mhm,
right? I'm not going to go spend all this money or all this time baking this out and perfecting, quote unquote, perfecting it, right? Walking in and being like, da 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 da, here you go, and have it be completely off the mark.
mhm.
Whether it's this, a
Right.
word choice thing that's off the mark,
Mhm.
it's an audience thing that's off the mark, or all of the above,
Right.
right? And we need those check-in points, to your point. Bring those stakeholders along and make sure that they feel bought into the process and that we are making then the right decisions along the way to make sure
Exactly.
that what we're going to put out there is successful.
Absolutely. Because to your point, right, this could be anything from there's one example I have, we were writing a case study, and it was about, it had to do with revenue and revenue improvement, and I'm not even gonna try and state whatever it was, right, how I said, "We did this thing with revenue." It was like 2 words were flipped, right? And when you're talking about revenue and margins and 2 words can be massively different, right? And of course, you build in redundancies and you build in checks, and so it would have gotten caught, right? But being able to catch it before that hook then was proliferated across all of the promotional material, honestly, because I was like, "Hey, this is how I wanna phrase this," right? It's a Teams message. "Hey, this is how I wanna phrase it. Is this right?" Followed by a 45-minute call where I pretended to keep up with my revenue cycle team and understand what they were saying. But right, it can be anything from that to we are completely reimagining our website, and we're reimagining the way that our clients and prospects and analysts and media come into our website and figure out what we do. Come with me on that journey because I'm proposing something that's a little bit different. Um,
Yeah. And one of the things that is striking me is, going back to the word you used earlier is curiosity. That's important. But another trait that's really important here is vulnerability,
yeah,
right? And being willing to share what may be a half-baked
mhm,
concept to get a gut check on
mhm,
something and make sure that it's right. And that requires a level of vulnerability,
mhm,
right? And being willing to have an answer of like, no, that's not right. But that normalizes that. That normalizes this notion that, we need everybody to be involved, and it does need to be a collective thought process. Not that marketing is just going to sit over here and, develop campaigns or messaging or whatever it is and have it just be, ready for prime time. So I think
absolutely.
that's really important.
Yeah, we one of our team's favorite, well, it's one of my favorite phrases, and I don't know if my team just puts up with it, but it's the fastest way to the right answer is to put down the wrong answer, right? Like, and I really I swear by that, right? Because we also, you know this, we're also walking this fine line between we need buy-in and we need to be right, right? And if we're right, so we have the buy-in because we're doing it, but we also cannot go so far that we're doing this decision by committee, right? Which is like where you have to get
Yeah.
75 people to approve a thing. And so there's a very fine line there that we're always trying to balance. But anyway, the point is to talk about the vulnerability that you have to have. To me, that reframing of I am owning this. I am owning that I'm putting something down. It's not a shot in the dark, right? It is an informed opinion or an informed deliverable, right? It's not I'm not talking about purple skies when I need to be talking about patient experience, right?
Right.
But I'm just putting something down, and I'm putting something down because I know the easiest way for most people to react is when they see something, and usually if it's
Yes.
wrong, we get there faster. Okay, because you can identify it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about what bringing people along looks like in practice.
Mhm.
You've given a couple of examples. You've mentioned to me that you hold a recurring meeting where marketing essentially like opens the doors, says like, here's
Yeah.
what we're working on. What questions do you have? What do you need from us? What
Mhm.
really prompted you to start doing that? And like, who are the stakeholders, right? What are the cross-functional
Yeah.
teams that you invite into that?
Yeah, so it was called for a long time Marketing Monday. We've rebranded it recently to True North, right? So we want to be that North Star that
Mm,
our team knows they can come to us, and we're here. And it's once a month. We meet. The impetus for it was, quite frankly, this reaction of several people in the organization. We don't know what marketing does, right? I was like, "Oh, man, what do you mean you don't know what marketing does?" Like, but to me, that's the kind of feedback that you have to take in, right? That's where we go to, like, you have to check your ego. That's not about, okay, so that means if I think, Sarah, that you should know exactly what we're doing, if I'm telling you X, Y, and Z, and you still say to me, we don't know what you're doing, okay, then I need to adapt, right? I need to meet you where you are. Um, and so that was the impetus. We don't know what marketing's doing. And so I was, quite frankly, brainstorming with one of my mentors, and she was like, "Why don't you just meet with everybody?" I'm like, people are gonna want to come to a meeting once a month with marketing. And she was right. People I just, on a whim, this was maybe a year and a half ago, threw a calendar invite out there for a Monday for half an hour and said, it started out very casual. It started out with I'm gonna come on here and I'm just gonna talk about what we're doing, what's on our radar. And I'm reserving the back half. I want to hear from you. What are you guys hearing? So that's how it started out, and it has evolved. It's evolved to being more formal. You asked who was invited. I I tend to be a go big and then get called back person. And so I invited everybody. I mean, I'm from C-suite through all of my sales team. And it's for now, at the initially, some of them, some delivery leaders came, meaning like presidents of my organization were there, chiefs of staff, were there, and they still will come periodically, right? And now it's grown, and so a lot of the sales team comes. Most of our delivery centers have representatives there. The international team, and almost any time I talk with someone internally who I haven't connected with previously, I'll mention the call and I'll say, "Are you interested?" And 90% of the time they say yes. And so recruiters and our consultant managers and consultants, it's, if I could, I would probably do this isn't all hands, but we know there's formal internal comm strategies that we need to follow. But anyway, um, yeah, that was it. It really started from I just couldn't stomach that feedback because part of my ethos is transparency and communication, right? I want you to know what's going on. I want you to ask questions. I want you to feel like I am accessible if you think you need something or you have feedback. And so to get that feedback, we don't know what's going on with marketing. I was like, well, I gotta do something about this. And I'm gonna go.
yeah. And I don't think you're the first marketing leader or marketing department or team that's ever heard that. I think that's actually a pretty common reality out there. But kudos to your mentor for giving you such a great piece of advice, and kudos
Mhm.
to you for acting on it, right? And like your initial reaction was kind of like, "What? Oh, people really want to
Oh,
come to this thing?" And like, look at what it's turned into. And I'm curious for you to share a little bit more in terms of what the overall impact you believe that it has had, and or what has surprised you about creating this format, and really letting people into the process of what marketing's working on.
I think so. This meeting has really become the moments of this meeting I'm the most proud of. This meeting in particular that I'm the most proud of are actually when we start to have dialogue. So it's not just marketing saying,
Yes.
here's the campaign we're running, here's our latest social media follower. Those are all important things,
Yeah.
of course. But what I'm most proud of, honestly, is the moments when, and this happened relatively early on. It's a little bit of a high I've been chasing, but one of the folks who was on one of the extended teams, if that's broad enough, actually said, right, this person was vulnerable, and they said, "Hey, when I'm positioning Nordic, right, I say XYZ, but I find that sometimes that falls flat. What do other people say?" Right? And so e to have that person show up and engage that way, and then for right, because that's one thing, but then really we had this amazing engagement, and because it was such a cross-functional call, right? We had sales, we had delivery, we have recruiters, we had marketing, we had leaders that all were able to answer in this unbelievably supportive way. It wasn't a, "Oh my gosh, you don't know how to position Nordic." It was, "Hey, this is my experience, this is what's happening." Right? And so, I am proud of that. I'm proud that that moment was created for this person to ask the question and to be met with, like I said earlier, I do feel immensely blessed that Nordic, our folks, our delivery leaders, our leaders are incredibly smart, and they are unbelievably generous with that. You just need to tune into it. So anyway, so I'm most proud when the conversation opens up, when it goes beyond whatever it is that marketing's presenting, and questions are asked and we're able to respond. And I think that has the most impact. The other impact I think is the trust, right? So the more that we are open and direct, and we bring people into the process, and we show that if you have a question or you have feedback, like, we love feedback, right? We can take it. That builds, in my opinion, to this environment where we can have these conversations, right? One of my colleagues just called it passionate conflict. We
Mm.
we can really get into what we don't see eye to eye on, and we can do it in this space where, um, we know tomorrow we're gonna show up the exact same way to each other, right? And so I'm not saying that that necessarily happens on this call. This call's quite big, right? But in my opinion, opening it up, being vulnerable, showing everyone what we're working on, letting them know there's no secrets behind these marketing doors, right? I mean, we might not show you the real mess behind, this pretty scene, but come in, see what we're working on. I think it goes a long way to building trust, which is foundational.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come back to trust in a minute here. But you mentioned that one of the biggest things that has come out of this, or one of the things you're proudest of, or your favorite part of this whole format, is the dialogue.
Mhm,
And I think you're absolutely right. I think that that is one of the most important takeaways in this conversation. And I think the missed opportunity for many organizations, because I see this all the time as a consultant or an agency partner, is we are best at what we do
mhm,
when we know, right, as much as we can possibly know about your customer, their pain points, right? What's going on inside of the organization. And so it can't just be a one way, marketing reporting to the organization. Here's what we're doing. Here's how it's performing. But rather, hey, here is something that we're seeing
mhm,
as something that needs to be fixed, or an initiative that could be incredibly powerful for the organization. What do you all think?
mhm.
Or here's a question that we've been pondering as a marketing organization. We'd love your take on it. Really opening that floor for a rich collaborative discussion, I think, to your point, is absolutely the magic of a dialogue like this.
I love it. I It's my favorite thing in the world when you have a group, right? Because it speaks to so much. It speaks to that psychological safety, that people are willing to be open. It speaks to the trust that you're going to do something with this information that makes sense. You're going to action it in some way. It really truly is my favorite thing when you get any kind of group of people, um, really kind of disagreeing on something, right? Because I also think none of us have a good idea, right? No idea comes out of our brains perfectly baked, right?
Right.
There's
Yeah.
nothing. Like, we need each other to build on that initial, kernel of inspiration to say, oh, but what about this? What about that layer? Oh, have you considered this angle? Right. And um, that happens most acutely when there is open dialogue, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Or taking like, hey, I heard this the other day.
Hmm.
I heard this word, I heard this phrase, but I'm not
Hmm.
sure I fully understand it yet. Like, tell me
Hmm.
more about that. Cause I
Hmm.
think there might be a powerful idea inside of that. And that, it's a learning moment for everybody. You've also mentioned the word trust several times in just the past,
Only a few times.
5 minutes, right? And this really brings out, I think, the human side of marketing leadership and emotional intelligence
Mhm.
as being so important for marketing leaders. And I also think it requires removing ego from the process. So what's your take on that? Like, how do you remove ego from the process? And any thoughts you have on sort of like the role of emotional intelligence in this kind of a format and why that's so important for marketing leaders?
I think that if you buy into this philosophy that marketing is really like the heart, it can be a really central part of an organization, then you're taking on an immense responsibility to understand those people to whom you're feeding, right? And you're getting fed from. And that means understanding their motivations or allowing space for motivations that you don't understand. Um,
Hmm.
and it means tuning in to what's happening in their world. It means meeting them where they are at times. And being able to do that is predicated on being able to set your ego to the side, right? Not to have no ego, right? We are all humans. If we are a marketing leader, we probably have decent sized egos and levels of confidence, right? But with that comes a responsibility to recognize when that is impeding progress and impeding connection. And all of that is predicated on pillars of emotional intelligence, right? And understanding how to talk to people, how to match energy, how to understand what's not being said, how to oftentimes I think of it like I'm playing double dutch, like, when am I coming in? When am I jumping in? What do you need from me? And really, I mean, maybe it's the Gemini in me, right? But the goal is I just want to connect. I want what's in your brain and I want that to influence my work. And so that happens when we have a relationship, right? And when you know that I have for me, right, when I have the best interest of the firm at heart, right? And um I also think in our industry in particular, it helps immensely when you're connected to that through line, right? And so what I mean by that is it it can be 6 degrees of separation, it can be 1 degree of separation, but there is a real impact that happens on the clinician's ability to serve their patients and the outcomes that those patients realize, right? So for Nordic, what that can mean is truly 6 degrees of separation, right? We are updating a password, which may or may not have immediate impact. I don't mean to denigrate that at all. It's very important, right? People have access, but it can also mean a dashboard that gives real time actionable data to clinicians during clinical trials, which is both of those things are accurate. And so stepping back to putting my ego aside because someone might come to me and disagree with the way I've positioned something, right? And they might be very passionate about it. This isn't passion because they think they're right above all else, right? They think that they know best. This is passion that is born in wanting outcomes for those we ultimately serve, in my opinion, right? And so if we as leaders can reframe every time we approach these discussions and conflict, which I strongly believe in conflict, right? With this isn't about me. That's the putting your ego aside. This isn't about me. This isn't about did I get that word right or wrong. This is about ultimately I'm trying to solve a problem for a provider so that someone who needs them gets their best.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I know this is something, because we know each other, that you're particularly good at is creating that sort of shared language, shared understanding, shared reference point. And a lot of that, to your point, comes from knowing, like, really keeping the audience's needs in mind and who you serve. And at the end of the day, what are we trying to do for them? But I also know that you are also really good at creating other mechanisms, whether it's an analogy or a metaphor or et cetera. Like, just as an example, you recently gave a presentation around using celebrity comparisons as a way to help create that shared understanding. This was for a new brand launch. And to me, what's interesting is not necessarily the celebrity comparison itself, but it's the idea that people often need that shared language to get aligned around something,
Mhm.
right? So that I might, to your point, be coming in with a really passionate idea on something, and it might seem like I'm being argumentative or contrarian to what you're saying for the point of being contrarian, but actually not. And it's just because I'm really passionate about, getting this end result right
Mhm.
for a customer. But when we can use maybe an analogy or a metaphor,
Mhm.
maybe that shows us we're actually more on the same page than not, right?
Mhm.
And so I think realizing amongst these stakeholder groups, you're going to have people who are coming from very different backgrounds and disciplines, right? You might have an engineer over here, you might have a clinician over here, you might have a legal or compliance person over here, and then here sits marketing, right? And
Yeah,
so creating that shared language and shared understanding, I think, is really important to be able to work together and work through some of the conflict, which, to your point, is actually really healthy for the organization.
absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I couldn't agree more. Honestly, it that and that like that's our role, right? That our job is to understand what problem needs to be solved, right? And then it's our job to tell the story on how we can solve it. And that's not just about our clients. Of course it is. Of course, right? It's none of us is here, right? Like it's all right, might have to edit that part out. Like, what am I trying to say, Sarah? It's we are the storytellers, right? We are the storytellers. We can do that, and we should, in my opinion, not just do it for our clients and our prospects. Of course, we want to grow our businesses. Of course, we do. Of course, we want to serve those people I talked about serving. But in so doing, we also have to serve problems for delivery. We have to solve problems, the problems we can solve, right? For sales, or facilitate problem solving, and it's what we should be best at. There's a problem, there's a solution. How do we convince everybody that this is the way down the path to the solution, right?
No, I love that. And we're almost out of time, but I would love to end with a few quick fire questions here, Gwen. What's one sign that an organization has an alignment problem?
Mm. When you all right, Sarah, I might need a couple takes on this because I want
Yep,
to make
that's
sure that
fine.
that really makes sense. But to me, I use this, we have this safety mechanism with my kids, right? You can keep a surprise from mom and dad. You may not keep a secret, right? And so I think when that shows up in business, what you'll see is, in my opinion, is fear that I've misspoken, fear that I've said too much. Now, I'm not
Mm,
there are things that not everyone is privileged to, right? Set that aside. That's
right.
what we're
Yes.
talking
Yeah.
about. We're talking about things that, you found out this person, maybe stepped out of process a little bit, or this thing might not have checked all the boxes. And now there's fear around saying something. No, right? No, when there's alignment and when there's culture, um, I don't know if I like that answer, Sarah. I think because I'm speaking more about culture, right? I don't know if that's an indication of
Yeah.
alignment. Um, Let me think really fast because it's interesting. Okay, I think really when you start to see alignment across the board, you start to see. common language that may have been fresh 6 months ago, a year ago, right? That you may have had to explain, and I've got to explain it again. And now all of a sudden you're starting to see this common language, common positioning threaded throughout conversations that you have nothing to do with. And then finally, people are presenting it back to you, right? Or
Mm.
group or whatever, as if it's just completely ingrained in the organization. So you'll know that you've driven to a point where people are in agreement. They're aligned because there is now a common language that you almost don't even know where did it start.
I love that. I love that. And what you're describing is essentially no surprises,
Mhm,
right? They have been brought along so much
mhm,
that really by the time this thing is ready to go live
mhm,
or whatever word you want to use,
mhm.
right? It should kind of be like a non-thing. It's not
Yeah,
like da 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 da, here's the da da the thing, right? With the confetti coming
mhm,
down. Like, no, the
mhm,
organization already was bought in how many
mhm.
weeks and months ago that this was the direction we're going to go, that now it's just kind of like, yep, and there it is. It's out in the world. Great job,
Exactly,
marketing. On to the
exactly.
next thing, you know? Love
Yeah.
that. Um, what is a leadership trait that you think marketers need to be more intentional about developing?
Um, I do think that that balance of executive confidence with the vulnerability, right? It's the it helps with that conflation of what is our role, what is our impact. When we are confident, right? When I can go back to a group that back to an earlier example of, did you name this right or wrong? I can confidently come and defend my position, but I'm also going to be open, right? And so I think the trait that marketing leaders most need to embody really is that balance of executive presence with confidence while also being incredibly open to what's happening and feedback and strategy updates, etc.
Love that. Last question. What's one piece of advice you'd give a marketing leader trying to build more influence inside of their organization?
Um, I like to lead with questions. I wanna ask more questions than I give answers. I want to really deeply understand, and then once an opinion is formed, I like to have the data behind it, right? And to have reasoning and to be able to really explain why we've landed where we've landed.
That's so great. I love that. Gwen, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed the conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Yeah, hopefully we've inspired everybody to think bigger about our roles as connectors and translators, helping our organizations all swim and move in the same direction. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to the show. Thanks for tuning into the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence, because the future of healthcare depends on it. We'll see you next time.